Hello, everybody, and welcome to WordBirds, a birds of a feather conversation amongst people who care about words. Today on the show, I've got Justin Stevens. Justin is Support Operations Manager here at Acrolinks. I've got Paul Bongers. Paul Bongers is VP of Strategy, and I'm Chris Willis, your host and Chief Marketing Officer here at Acrolinks. Today, we're going to be talking about generative AI, how it's impacting the enterprise, how it creates new levels of productivity, but where the secret and not so secret risk lives. Let's sit back and get some insight from the fly. All right, welcome guys. Welcome to the show.
Hey there.
Excited to have you here today. Let's get started. Let's just jump into the rapid fire. It's a thing we like to do here. I'm going to say some things, and I just want quick answers from each of you. Start with Paul. Generative AI, risk or opportunity?
Opportunity.
Cool. Justin?
Opportunity with risk if you don't do it right.
Fantastic. Justin, last thing you created with GPT assistance?
Code snippets.
Paul?
Ooh, a silly poem for a colleague. I know.
Weird. Anyway, moving on to the next question. If you're familiar with Willy Wonka, the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Charlie's dad dealt with a little bit of AI himself. The Charlie's dad scenario. Paul, is AI a job killer or a job maker?
It's a job transformer / job maker.
Justin?
Yeah, I'd go with it's a little bit of both in that it will change some jobs and automate some things, but it will create others.
That's exactly the Charlie Bucket's dad scenario. Fantastic. All right, this is the part of the conversation where we just jump into this and start talking. So I think a great place to start with this is, let's look at sort of what the market is doing right now. I think we have a general understanding of what generative AI is, ChatGPT being a great representation of that, but not the only solution in this space. Paul, do you want to just give us a quick overview for the folks that are just tuning in on what generative AI is, what the promise of generative AI is in the market?
So what it is, it's a GPT it can generate pre-known, it can generate content or can generate knowledge. It can generate text out of pre-existing knowledge. So technically, it's if I look at it, it's an interface on top of a knowledge base that then can produce very believable statements about how the world works or any question you might have and answer it. And it creates a whole new language filter, if you will, on top of the things that we know as humans. What it's a generative pre-trained transformer, right? That's GPT, generative pre-trained transformer. So the biggest opportunity here is that it can take fairly complex information and articulate it in such a way that everybody can understand it, which is amazing. On the flip side, what it cannot do is have new experiences and create new knowledge and new things in the world. It can only articulate what already exists. So with that in hand, I would say the opportunities are endless. You can do a lot of great with it. You can do a lot of bad with it. But generally, it is a game changer in the way that we communicate in this world.
So you're sort of moving now into the risk aspect of it too. We're training this thing on content in the world, and then it's going to rebuild that content into what looks like a cogent answer. Justin, why is this a potential problem?
Well, as Paul just mentioned, in terms of the model that it's trained on, I think that's really the key. With any system, we've seen so many examples now of not just ChatGPT, but a whole other slew of alternatives who've done some public demos, and we've seen organizations already announcing that they've been using generative AI to create and publish content. only to that for people then to go and see that content and find out that there were many factual errors in that. So it's, if you're not training it on a model that's limited to quality proven information, it has some quirks in that it can make things up to fill in gaps. So it's how you decide to use that technology, the model on which you train it, and how you govern it to ensure that it's providing factual information and based on the goals you've set for the content that you want to create.
I mean, I think that's kind of the issue that we have, is that we are at the cusp of this new, I mean, this is a flying car moment. If you were looking back from when we were kids, what would technology do? It would be doing all the work for us. And so we now have this thing that does work for us. It just might not do it well. And so when I think about, is this risk, is this opportunity, I've publicly stated that I think that it's an opportunity. But to be fair, when I said that, when I posted that on LinkedIn months ago, still wasn't 100% sure that it was 100% true that it was. And as things come into focus, I'm actually more confident than ever that it is an opportunity. Much like any new hot tech toy, everybody's messing about with specifically ChatGPT, but there's Neva, there's Bard, there's all kinds of things out there people can be messing with, and we'll talk about some of those in a bit. But from my view, where I sit, our customers here at Acrolinx are the world's largest businesses. And much like every other time that there's been a hot new tech toy that everyone's messing about with, everybody's got InfoSec. And customers are starting to shut this down. And I think that's interesting. There are numerous security, technical, and intellectual property issues with the use of generative AI. And if you don't believe me, dear audience, ask ChatGPT, because it'll tell you. Like, if you ask what are the risks, it's pretty open with it, and it will list them in a bullet format. And none of those issues include the fact that the solution literally makes up measurable percentages of what it generates. So for me, like, as a person that speaks in the world, as a business, I don't want to dismiss this. I'll call it a trend. Sometimes, as your mother might have noted when you were a child, if everybody jumps off a bridge, it might be best to at least look off the edge, if not jump with them. And this is one of those times where there's a person standing off the highway, off ramp, holding a sign that says the world is ending. And right now, I mean, look around, he might be right in the light of the current circumstances, but that person is deemed off balance and should be ignored. I don't want to be that person with the sign. I think that we need to find a way to lean into this. I want to use this product. I know that our customers and many of you that are on this call want to use this product, and that's where there's that balance between the fact that it's not an enterprise-friendly solution necessarily. It creates risk, but there is a lot of upside. So if we're managing under that set of guidelines, I want to use this, I think it's valuable, but I understand the risk. How then, gentlemen, do you do that? How do you manage, how do you govern something this vast in a way that an enterprise reduces the risk associated with bad misinformation, plagiarism, trademark issues, copyright issues? How do you start that?
So I would say, so first of all, you make a good point. We don't live in a risk-free world, and our customers definitely don't either. If we would have the IT department or the InfoSec department run the business, we would probably all grind to a very stern halt, because these are professions that are built to reduce risk. The reality is that we need to find a balance. How much risk are we willing to take in exchange for what kind of reward? And there is a lot of reward at the end of in using generative AI in your business for all kinds of purposes. And we should talk about them, by the way, before this becomes like a doomsday podcast. But when it comes to like, well, one of the biggest concerns obviously being misinformation. I think I'm going to say something that's probably like the most logical thing for a lot of people, but let's just repeat that. And it's just something that is not going to change now. That's not going to change in 5 years, not going to change in 200 years. And that is that enterprises or any organization in the world will always be liable and held accountable for the content that they put out into the world. If you put hate speech into the world, you're going to be responsible for it. You're going to be held accountable for it. You're going to get in trouble. So you got to be mindful of what you say in public, and so therefore you need to make sure that whatever you produce in content, whether it's humans creating content, whether it's people creating content, you're going to be held accountable. With humans, it's a little bit easier because you actually have had probably some good job interviews. Before you actually hire these people, you have an idea of how they think and what they can do. You tested how they write. You can reason with them on a one-on-one. You can instruct them on what things you can and cannot say. And generally, humans are capable of, when you give them like a half a page with a couple of bullet points, like this is generally our guidelines of what you cannot say, then they can extrapolate from there logically what cannot be said. An AI cannot, because an AI doesn't have knowledge. The generative AI purely just generates content out of whatever database lies underneath. And that gets me to my point on what facts really are and what truth is, and then the model on top. So I kind of see this in like a little bit of a structure, where at the very bottom of this structure is a box, and in the box is truth. And truth, we don't know. So sorry, I'm going to be a little bit of a lecturer here. I'm a history major, and this is the philosophy of history. So how is history actually written? Problem with history and generally knowledge is that truth is very hard to capture, because the only way you can observe truth is by actually observing it. How do we know that Louis XVI was beheaded? Because a lot of people observed it and then they wrote it down. And because a lot of people wrote down the same thing, we kind of say like, well, it's a fact that Louis XVI was beheaded, but we don't know. We weren't there. We haven't observed it. So we're going to have to just believe it. And so that's a fact. A fact is made by consensus. One person's truth is not necessarily another person's truth. There's differences of opinions, and there always will be. So if you have a database of information, of facts, and you use that as your source of truth, then that knowledge is heavily skewed to whatever your belief system is, then the AI will produce all kinds of content that's based on exactly your belief system and will not represent the belief system of others, the information that it lacks. And so therefore, if you control the facts that go into that an AI uses, then you also have more control over the output of it. So
right. I mean, it might be a good thing and it might be a bad thing. If your large language model is garbage, filled with alternative facts, then you're creating alternative fact content. If you own your large language model, it represents your individual or your business, that might actually be a feature.
It's also a little bit of confusion. I see a lot online, like people talking about like, well, but for example, GPT-4 is much better than GPT-3. It's like, yes, it's much better if you have a database of knowledge, if you will, it's much better at actually, if you ask it a question, it's much better at compiling or generating an answer from that knowledge. It's much better at that than GPT-3 does. It doesn't change the underlying knowledge though.
Right. So Justin, I mean, as a creative person, where do you see the balance between people creating content and AI creating content, and how does this go forward? How do we work together on this?
Well, the way I would look at it in terms of companies creating content, it still comes back to the core reason, even before AI enters the equation, which is, what are you creating the content for? What do you want to achieve? What are your goals for that content? What's your company's voice? What are your standards? And so when you're creating any kind of content, you want to have some way of governing that before you publish it and measure it as you go forward. And the same is true, I think, but even more so when it comes to AI generated content. From my perspective, if you're creating content without any governance and any measures, then you're just creating some more noise. And if you bring in generative AI, then all you're doing is swapping going nowhere slowly for going nowhere fast. What you want to do is partner your AI with your governance. And I think the key here is, and I understand a lot of the fear if people have only seen things like AI demos, where the large language model is based on whatever it's trawled from the internet, and surprise, surprise, it comes out with some pretty hateful stuff. What if you have already got a body of very high quality content because you've been using governance on that content, and you've published and measured it, and you already have an existing source now of your own top performing high quality content that speaks in the language and the voice that you want your company to present out there, and you use that as the model to train AI to help you as a starting point. AI isn't a replacement for people. It's a starting point to create the first premise of a conversation to get you started, which you can then go on and iterate and improve.
Right.
So there are, if used correctly, there are huge gains to be made in terms of turnaround time, efficiency. But yeah, you can get it very wrong if you don't think it through. But there's no reason to simply look at the examples of how it's gone wrong very publicly so far and say that, oh, we should steer away from it. I think there are, of course, you've got to have measures in there to deal with not just matching your content quality goals, but accuracy, factually correct, ownership and plagiarism. We've already got generative images. We're now getting AI generating video. First phrase that pops in my mind is, what could possibly go wrong? But as with anything, you think it through first of all. You train it on the right model, and you can use it hugely to your advantage, providing you are governing it correctly.
First of all, my AI created avatar photos. I look amazing. They put me in an astronaut suit.
They are pretty good, I must admit.
It's really amazing. I've never been an astronaut, so it is misinformation, but it's pretty cool. I mean, I think, the interesting thing is, to your point, I think a lot of people in my role would like to look at their organization and say, look, I can get 5x the productivity integrating in this type of a content creation tool. I can do 5 times more content. And that technically is true. You can create a lot more of a thing with AI than you can with people. But do you want the thing you create? And that's where, I mean, again, how you use this product, the prompts you use, the responses it comes back with, where it's pulling the information from. Like, I ask it to write me a story about Tom Sawyer, and it comes back and it writes it, and it looks very feasible. Like, okay, this seems like it's probably right. But I have no idea that it pulled half of it from a joke site, and that was where the SEO took it. And so half of my book report is a joke about Tom Sawyer, and I don't catch it because I'm like, this thing's cool. It's got me covered. And so creating 5 times as much content with no guardrails in place, with no governance around this, with no control, gives you a huge volume of potential risk and problem the ability to layer risk over your productivity, risk management over your productivity is critical at this juncture, so that you don't run into issues. And I think we all innately understand the risk associated with not caring about diversity and inclusion in content. Like, I think we all understand the risk. It's not a, I want to get to 90% accurate, inclusive language. Now, it only takes a fraction of a percent to turn off your audience. Like, if you look ignorant, your audience spots that impacts your business. Just one little thing. So we understand that. That's a thing in nature. We aspire to 100% accuracy in the selection of our words from an inclusion standpoint. And then we say we want to create 5x the content using a computer that's pulling from anywhere, and we don't have anything in place to make sure that we're protecting ourselves. We understand one thing, but we don't care about it over here. And that's I think the takeaway from this whole session today is I'm saying I support your use. People that are listening right now, I support your use of generative AI technologies because it's fantastic. But if you're doing it without proper risk reduction in place, if you're doing it without governance, if you're doing it without brand alignment, if you're doing it without DE&I protections, accessibility protections, if you do it without any of that, you're putting the business in harm's position. Just like any other new thing that you might just connect to your corporate internet. I mean, it's powerful, but it's dangerous. And that's got to be the thing that we think about as we think about the strategies that are going to define the use of this product. If you're listening to us right now from the New York region, we're going to be in New York next Thursday night talking about some of this. Contact Allie and tell her you want to come. It's right in, I believe, in Midtown. You should definitely come to that. That's my plug for our New York evening next week, next Thursday night. But continuing forward, I mean, I think allowing businesses to wrap this, like, what's the best way to look at the risk associated with this and get your arms around it, either of you?
So generally, I think there's, I'd like to answer that, but also at some point I want to talk about the positive things and what you can actually do with this.
Yeah,
because we talk a lot about the risk, right? Because I think there's the obvious part, like, yes, it's very quick at writing stuff, that there's an efficiency there that's great. One of the applications that I've seen is just purely around ideation. So if you want to write an article and you need to either rely on a subject matter expert, or you just generally want to write about something, and we'll find that us humans, we are inherently limited to the information that we can store in our heads, but also, like, unless you are like have a 60-year-old long career in academics about a single topic, you're not going to have too much information about, or like, all the perspectives on the same topic. But that's the beauty about, like, an AI. Like, if I want to write about something, yes, I'll probably just ask an AI to summarize the topic for me, because then within seconds, I will know that I have all of the information, all the different angles on paper. If I have to rely on the sources that, for example, the GPT 3.5 uses, which is pretty much all the academic journals and Wikipedia, and then, like, the other half is like the internet at random. So it's a great way for us humans to get a lot of things that I could be writing about, because we as humans, we're really limited to creating choices for ourselves, creating options, being creative, and coming up with different things that we could be doing. We're very good at down selecting. Once we have a whole bunch of things that we could be doing, we're very good at, like, I'm going to pick this and this and this, and I'm going to work my way from there. So an AI actually helps really well in an area that humans are just inherently not good at. And then probably create content and so on and so forth. But in terms of controlling it, like, it starts with, you mentioned it already, like, you got to control the source or at the very least, you got to be able to understand the sources of where the information came from in the first place. I think Niva AI does a good job there, the search engine, because they actively want to show sources. I read that, you know, our friends at OpenAI and at Google as well, that this is also something that they're looking into, and it makes sense. But there's also a limitation to when you can really show sources, because if you write a poem, like the last thing I did on ChatGPT, have it write a poem, like what's the point in showing me the sources of where you got your information from, of how you're going to make fun of my colleague in Shakespearean style? Like, that's not very helpful. But then again, if you're actually going to be take information and you want to put it out there in the world, I think first of all you need to know where it comes from, but also I think credit is where it's due. Is mention the sources. That mentioning the sources works to your credibility, but also acknowledge that, you know, that you're not the creator or original owner of content. I think there's a lot around plagiarism, talk around plagiarism here that's really interesting, especially in the field of SEO. They're talking a lot about this because, you know, these are companies that put a lot of content out there in the world, and they wanted to have their article to be read most, people coming to their domain, reading their articles. That is already starting to be, Google started years ago by taking that away slightly, by taking a snippet and providing that as a direct answer. So people don't leave the Google search engine to go to a web page to read an article, but they get their answer straight in Google and they never visit that website. And a marketing opportunity got lost. Now with AI, you have that becomes even stronger, but now you don't even know what the source is of that content. Google Bard just produces an answer, and you're just going to have to believe that that's true. Same with Microsoft Sydney. So in that way, like, understanding and controlling the sources is the first step to governance. But that said, there's before the fact, and then there's after the fact. And there's always, in my mind, there's always going to be a human needing to be involved, mostly probably even just for legal compliance. That's at the end of the day, if a piece of content does stir up legal issues in some kind of way, we need to point at a person who has been held responsible or accountable for it. Because if it's not the person who looked at it and edited it or approved it, if there's no such person, then the liability goes back to pretty much, you know, as it goes in an organization. If nobody owns it, the CEO owns it, and the business gets in trouble. But also, it's always good practice to say, like, look, this content is created, have a human look at it, because of exactly just what you said. First of all, you want to check what is being said. Is this factually correct? Are we quoting our sources? Are we okay with the messaging in here? And then secondly, how is it being said? The way you communicate, the tone, does this align with your brand? Are you saying it in a sneer? Does it come across like that? And people might feel offended when they read it. You don't want to go down that path. So no, I mean, there are limitations there.
I want to start spinning this thing around a little bit the way that you want to go and talk about the cool uses of this. But you just said something that I can't let go, because I think it is really important for people. You just essentially associated the risk of an individual inside an organization creating content in any way. Forget about whether it's human content or generated content. The risk of content going all the way up to the CEO to be held accountable. Here's what I know. What I know is that most companies don't think that way. In most large businesses, there's somebody central that runs marketing. There's somebody central that runs product. There's somebody central that runs sales, and so on. There is not somebody that centrally runs the digital customer experience as it is comprised of content, the way that we communicate as a business, because the experience is one thing, and it starts with the creation of product and the way that we describe product in our technical documentations and our product manuals. It moves into the way that we educate, we market that product, we sell that product, we service and support that product, all of that. is a single lexicon with different flavors and different tones in the way that we communicate. The way that I communicate in a marketing model is different than the way that I would communicate as a support person. We learned that here at this company when we implemented tone of voice early on. And I said, hey, support should use this. You know who doesn't think my tone of voice is cute? Our support customers. That's a thing we learned. But it all is the same words. We have one experience that we're trying to deliver. And companies need to see that this all does boil up to the C-level. Like, who's going to answer the question when something goes wrong and the world sees that the way something was written, it's not going to be the junior person in the content organization. It's going to be the person that's going to have to show up on MSNBC and answer for it. So if that's the case, how is it that there isn't more of these, I'm going to call it a chief something officer that owns all of this? Anyway, that's just the thing.
I'm just going to take a cheap shot here and use a statistic that I totally made up, but it seems very believable. But which is that arguably, I'd say that 90% of all the communication that an enterprise has with the market, with their audience, is via content. And the reason I'm saying that is, like, if I look at all the different companies that I spend money on, from my Netflix accounts to my utilities bill to whatever, I have never spoken to anybody at those companies. I don't know how often you call Netflix asking if someone can please unlock some content. Nobody does that. The way I know, this is the way we interact these days, through the content that's out there. And then I see people in organizations who have roles like communications director, or like, and they mostly are focused on PR. Like, oh, here are the news articles that are going to come out about our company, and control that messaging. But if you're in charge of communications, they're like, every piece of content you have in your organization is communication. And you are putting information out there in the world that can be interpreted, whether positive, whether negative, and you need to take responsibility for it. But it's a very fragmented world where some part of the communication, if you consider all content communication, some part of the communication is owned on this side, and on this one on this side. Some parts are not really owned, but kind of like created. Where is the ownership really? It's the large. If you take away, imagine this as a company, take away all of the content you have, stop every single content and delete it. I bet you your company is gone by the end of the year. It disappears from the face of the earth. That's how important your content is. Yet nobody is centrally owning it. That's just it is the future in this, especially now. It's interesting that the AI debate, because these generative AI isn't new, right? We've been doing this forever. I mean, technically, Alan Turing started it in the 1940s, but we've developed and we've evolved, and now with ChatGPT being, well, actually, technically it was Neva in August, which triggered OpenAI to go public with their ChatGPT, with GPT 3.5, which is with the ChatGPT interface, technical, but the only thing it did is it made it publicly available. In a premature state, they were the first to admit that. They're saying, like, we got to make the market now because other companies are coming forward. And so now all of a sudden we are being confronted with it. And what it does is that all of a sudden, all of these companies in the world, now our phone starts to ring, because now a lot of VPs in all kinds of organizations woke up and said, like, hey, maybe all this AI seems to be creating a lot of noise. They hallucinate all the time, a lot of fake news, a lot of misinformation. Do we have that in our organization? Which my answer is, like, you've been creating content for, like, decades. You never asked yourself that question in the first place. It was created by humans. Now you have the opportunity to do it via AI, but equally the risk is exactly the same. And it needs to be governed. You need to be in control of that, because it will either get you, it's the path to great success, or it's the path to absolutely the worst lawsuits you can think of.
Absolutely. Let's turn the corner. Cool things to do with generative AI. What have we done lately? What have we heard about lately that we think is super interesting, that folks that are listening right now get some value from? Justin, what's cool out there?
I mean, there's essentially no end to the possibilities that you can use it. I've seen it. So some very simple use cases, as I mentioned before, just going and grabbing a code snippet you want to create whether it's something for a website or a small application, and you say, ask me to create this feature in this language, and it will give you a code snippet and off you go. So there are lots of very, very quick, simple, practical things that can save you a lot of hunting around to finding a technical or a coding solution to get going. There are, from my own personal perspective as a musician outside of Acrolinks, it's a very different conversation when it comes to the ownership of art and things like that. But in terms of the business world and generative content, the list of possibilities just goes on. And I think those options, essentially, you'll get a very different picture depending on which direction you look at it from. If you start from the point of view of, oh, there's all of these AI options now which have been modeled on the internet, and here are all the dangers, and this is scary, do we really even want to go down that path? If you start, so all you see is a journey of risk. If you start from the position that you've just outlined about content is your most valuable voice to the world, and if you start from a point of rock solid governance, so that you know that the content that you're creating meets all of your goals, it speaks in the voice that you want to talk to the different audiences to which you're talking, using inclusive language, using engaging language, and all the rest of it. If you know you've got that in place, then whether a human's creating it or an AI is creating it, suddenly all you see is a journey of opportunity, because you can get very creative with all of the things you could use it for to save time, so that humans who are perhaps doing quite labor-intensive tasks could repurpose and do other things, do more exciting things. Part of it is going to be the final human step in the process to check that content before you publish it. But there are so many opportunities, providing you already know, if you've started from a foundation of reliable governance, you can do anything.
Absolutely. I mean, so from my end, I'm looking for things that are going to augment my experience, not replace the things that I would do, but augment what I do. So for instance, taking the transcript. So GoToWebinar will create a transcript from this very podcast episode, and being able to feed that into GPT-3 and come back with all the social posts from the things that we've just said, pull all that, like, what are the most important things that we've said? It feeds that out to us and gives us ready to use social. It's not creating anything. It's just taking the time to think through what seems interesting, giving us a head start. It's augmenting that experience. Or I like the idea of having it come up with ideas for topics, generating topic ideas for either writing or social. Like, here's some things that I care about. Tell me how I can make this very interesting and engaging. And it comes back and says, here are the 3 topics that you want to hit on. Here are the episodes of your next serial podcast. Go do that. I still have to do it. I still have to do all the things. I need to be the creative. I need to come up with all the content, but it's just guiding me in a direction. And I like that augmentation. It allows me to focus in the creative process, not have to think through, like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do next? Give me some ideas. I like that one. I'm going to go and use that. And that all just works within, many of these things, but ChatGPT will help you with that specifically. Paul, what are you doing with generative AI?
I see a lot of opportunity here, not just for enterprise, but generally for the world. So I think from just like simple enterprisey kind of work, I've seen applications in SEO, writing meta tags and meta descriptions, all of that stuff, which normally takes a lot of time. And then you have to think about like 3 different versions of writing the same sentence and see which one sticks and A/B testing it. all of a sudden that can just be done really quickly. I've seen applications where a lot of people use like all kinds of analytics suites or any kind of like technology that produces a lot of data and insights, where people or experts need to go in, look at the data and draw conclusions. This can just basically give you like, here's a 3-sentence summary of what just happened. And here's like a little summary of what we recommend you do next. Like, that's fantastic application. I think as well, like I think obviously a lot of the knowledge in the world is done by scientific experiments in academics. I would love to see this work eventually in a way that ChatGPT or like any kind of GPT, any kind of generative AI can take highly complex content like that basically, if you don't have an academic degree, it's really hard to consume, but it can take that and actually produce really simple explanations and summaries from it.
Explain the theory of relativity as if I'm a 5-year-old.
Exactly. Amazing. Like this just brings humanity forward, or is like, what does it actually mean? Or like, hey, my bank is trying to sell me this credit card and I have no idea what's in the fine print, and summarize it for me, you know, like, or for pharmaceuticals, like you get these huge disclaimers, you know, okay, summarize it to me, like explain it to me so that I can actually consume this information in a decent
I don't
way.
want to know, actually. No, I wouldn't do
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
I'm just good.
For you. But I think that generally there are a lot of like medial tasks that we can simplify, we can make easier. Also, like when we try to you try to like generate, like write an email and you're just stuck, you cannot get started with it. Great, just, you know what, this is kind of like what I want to say, and just give me a starting point. For me, it's not for me like taking it like as a big thing in a process and a big step, but there's a lot of small applications where you can, in a very smart way, make use of an AI that assists you. And this goes back to the Charlie in the Chocolate Factory, Charlie's dad. Throughout history, we have made advancements in technology. The Industrial Revolution saw people moving more into the cities, working in factories, automating processes, and where everybody thought like, oh well, but everybody's a farmer, we can't, you know, half of the world is going to have nothing to do. No, these people found their application in different ways. When the digital revolution really started to kick off and everybody started using a computer instead of a typewriter and sending mail around, and using email, we also thought like, wow, the postal industry is gonna struggle, and enter e-commerce. You know, like it's never been bigger. You'll find that if people will never be bored, people are inherently skilled, and if you take medial task away from people, you'll find that we will have a lot of ways to get humans to do the things that they're really excellent at, cognitive tasks that an AI just cannot do. And at the end of the day, why humans will never be out of the loop is because experiences and knowledge is created by humans, because we do things, we go to places and we experience experiences. An AI will not go on a holiday to I don't know, but the Bahamas, have an experience and write about it. No, it will be a human doing that, and then an AI will summarize the holiday for their family and their friends.
Fantastic. Gentlemen, I think we should see if there's any questions, but one thing I did want to touch on is we talked about it multiple times. If you are not familiar, because I was in a meeting this morning in Germany and I asked something about Willy Wonka and Charlie in the Chocolate Factory, and there was not the universal acceptance of it that I thought there was. We keep talking about Charlie's father. Charlie's father worked in a toothpaste factory, screwing caps onto the tubes of toothpaste. Early on in the movie, he got fired because a robot came in, started screwing the caps on the tubes of toothpaste. By the end of the movie, he got his job back servicing the machine that screwed the caps onto the tubes of toothpaste. And that's what Paul's talking about. Evolution happens. Jobs change. Justin said at the very beginning of this, it's not a job killer, it's a job changer. And that's where we are today. So keep your eye on the prize, screw some caps onto some toothpaste, and while you're doing that, keep looking at the devices that are going to do that for you and figure out how to run those as well. Allison,
yes,
are there any questions for us?
We do have some questions. So here's question number 1. Could you foresee a governance platform like Acrolinks to integrate with an LLM such that it applies controlled style and terminology upon generation instead of fixing aligning the style and terminology after generation?
I think the answer is like, what even would make you think no? We just said like you need to embrace change. So yes, of course, we are looking into all of this. The application of it is great. It's 2 parts. For Acrolinks, generative AI can do 2 things. One is we can we can at least reduce the risk barrier for enterprises to actually feel that make them feel comfortable to start using generative AI. There's a lot of risk experience. We asked our customers a few times of like, hey, would you use generative AI in your content supply chain? And the answer actually is consistently not today. And that says a lot. Like we see the application, but we're just not sure about the risk. And this is something where Acrolinks can help. And the other part where generative AI can be very helpful for Acrolinks is, of course, it allows us to create solutions to problems that were not solvable or not solvable in an economic way before. And so, yes, of course, we're looking at this. This is the world is moving on fast, and Acrolinks is not following. Acrolinks is avant-garde in this entire revolution, and happy to be part of it. It's exciting times.
What you got, Allie?
Great. Next one. What are your thoughts on using generative AI to create a support chatbot using Jira support requests and Confluence to train GPT-3 or 4 model to be a chatbot that can help respond to client support tickets?
That's already happening. At least in most of the answer bots that you will see around the internet are using some form of AI as a first step. Okay, I come from a background of support, and I'm our support operations manager, so I've got some personal opinions on this. And again, following on from what we've been talking about, I would never replace human support with only an AI. But in terms of a strategy for getting rid of vast numbers of oft repeated questions, if you have a chatbot which can immediately search all of the documentation and help articles and present you with very quick answers to questions much faster than waiting for a human to respond to a ticket, you can enable self-service support and turn around that feedback in a much faster way. There's a whole different AI chatbots out there now, and they are iterating as we speak. So absolutely, you can train it on the existing knowledge base that you have, and pulling from past tickets, whether that's in Jira or anywhere else, to find quick answers to questions. Rather than going and searching a frequently asked questions place of a website, you can have a chatbot do that for you and present you with the articles. And only if your particular need in that moment is not to find a previously documented case, but you have an issue that's something else, then your request goes through to a human support team who can respond to you. But it means you free up an awful lot of time for the more complex stuff by surfacing the very quick to answer and frequently asked questions. Yeah, that's already there, and watch this space for how we'll be using that at Acrolinks this year.
Good answer.
All right, next question. How much time will writers have to spend validating the accuracy of content generated from public content that offsets the productivity gain of the generated content?
Depends on the governance that they wrap around their creations. So if there is a platform that is able to, for instance, like Paul mentioned, provide sources. So I ask a question, it creates content. Here's where I got that content. Just that source alone might be enough. If you think that you're getting medical advice on your GI tract and the source is myfriendsbutt.com, that might tell you everything you need to know about the legitimacy of the content that you're looking at. And there's all kinds of variation of that type of governance that's in the process, either being created or already created today. If you're just writing freely, then you don't, I mean, the result that you get back right now from ChatGPT will not help you at all. You're gonna have to go fact check everything that you write.
Yeah, in addition as well, one of the examples I heard the other day was around translation of content, which I thought was an interesting insight, just to go to show where the limitations are. There's a company that actually looked into and worked with their translation agencies. They translate content into like 5, 6, 7 different languages. And they're actually, the translation agency came back saying like, well, actually, it's more expensive to have content pre-translated by an AI and then edited by a translator to make it work than actually just an editor by themselves just take the original text and translate it straight over, because it takes actually more time for an editor to look at what's the original, how the AI has translated it, and then validating, is this the way I want to say it? And that actually takes more time, which is like, it's not a time saver for that kind of work. Then again, for translation, if it's internal documentation like meeting notes or whatever that just need to be translated in different languages so that other people know what's been discussed, sure, you know, because the level of scrutiny is not that high, it's not going to be read by the broader public, it's fine. So it really, this is just an example, but the fact that it can really quickly produce some content doesn't necessarily mean that it's the right approach to get to the result. And I'm sure there are more examples like that out there, but I'll keep asking our customers.
Excellent. Ali, I think we're good. Thank you, gentlemen, for being on the show. Ali, thank you for setting this up, and thank you all for listening. This has been our first live episode of WordBirds. Check us out at WordBirds or acrolinks.com/WordBirds for more episodes. We drop an episode every week, and we'll continue to do that for as long as you're interested. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
WordBirds is hosted by Chris Willis, produced by Charlotte Baxter Reed, and brought to you by Acrolinks. For more information on Acrolinks, visit www.acrolinks.com.